All right, we're going to go over chapter 6 today. We're still pretty much on track. I know we kind of lost a period on Tuesday, trying to let people catch up and myself catch up. Um, so you can see the way it's set up here. I'm going to be responsible as soon as possible, hopefully this weekend, to give you your first assignment, and that'll be just to ask you to mock something up as far as what you're planning on doing in here when you're creating your own site. All right, and it'll probably be very general, and then I'll give you something more detailed as we go on. So again, the idea today is to go over chapter 6, which starts on page 143 in your book. You can see it's called Creating Killer Content, Adding and Editing Articles. One of the things that they'll mention in here is whether you're adding an article or editing an article, the screens look virtually identical. In fact, they are identical, except one says adding and one says editing. But other than that, they look the same and they pretty much work the same. What you're going to see too, and you may have seen this in earlier chapters, but for the next several chapters, what they'll do is they'll explain how to do things. They'll have you go and do a few things, and then they'll go through the major menus and the major options that you see in here and try to explain the stuff that's in here. So again, as always, the idea is not that you'll sit there and memorize this, but you'll hopefully take a little bit of time to practice doing some of the stuff that's in there. So as far as chapter objectives, you can see 4 of them on the bottom of the page: creating, editing, and formatting articles, splitting an article into intro and text and body text, dealing with long articles by splitting them into a series of pages, and then, like I mentioned, adjusting the general article settings. What they're going to do is have you add a brand new article in here. When you add it, and I can just literally bring up that site right now, what they tell you to do is to go into something like lipsum.com and grab 5 paragraphs worth of stuff. And then what ends up happening is you'll have your lead paragraph, that'll be this one right here, and then before each of the other 4 paragraphs, literally they'll put the equivalent of like about an H3 heading. All right, and then what they'll do is they'll talk about different ways that you can do this. All right, and different ways that you can, when you get done, that you can show the stuff on the screen. So that said, we'll take a look at it as we get into it in a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage. All right. For whatever reason, the author makes a big distinction here on page 144 about the difference between an article and a page, and he says there really is a difference. All right, it says you've read before, Joomla doesn't think of in terms of pages, because basically, again, what this is that this is a website. All right, and you're throwing stuff together in a website. That said, the author says, but even though that's the case, I'll still call them sometimes pages and sometimes call them articles. All right, we've gone through this in earlier chapters. Again, to create a new article, you go to Content, Article Manager, and you click on New. On the other hand, if you want to edit an existing article, bless you, you go to Content, Article Manager, and then you click on the link for the article that you want to change. All right. One of the other things they'll talk about at the end of the chapter here, and I guess I didn't mention it because they didn't show it in the objectives, is when an article becomes old, so to speak, you've got different things that you can do with it. All right, for instance, let's say that, I noticed when I walked by the office yesterday of one of the people who works in the business division, and I'm not saying this to be critical of the person, but they had some stuff up there that happened in March of 2014. And I figured it was almost 6 months old since that had happened. All right, well, on a website, that becomes even more important. You don't want to advertise an art show that happened 6 months ago, for example. All right, so you've got different choices. First, you can just set it from published to unpublished, which means it's still there and people don't see it. All right, that's an easy thing to do. You can trash it if it's not any good anymore. But a lot of times what you'll want to do is if you've created a poster or you've done something for an art show, well, maybe you're going to have, or whatever it is, you might have another one next year. So what you can do is you can archive it. All right, and I know, for example, and it just works out this way, that there is this craft show in Galena, Illinois, that's one of the bigger ones in the Midwest, and it happens every October right near my wedding anniversary. Yeah, Jeff's a real big craft guy, let me tell you. But the way it works out, it's almost always that weekend of our anniversary. So that's one of the things my wife asks me to do for her. And the point is, what they have in there, they've got the dates out there on their site for the one for 2014, 2015, and 2016. And I've never checked, but they probably someplace, if I looked hard enough, they probably have archived the earlier ones. And if they find a theme or a page or something that looks pretty good, they may tweak it a little bit. They may just use the same page too. All right, and if they really like the way that it looked, and just change the date on it from 2014 to 2015 or whatever. All right. The other thing that you can do with those articles is you literally can create an archive. All right, and when you archive an article, by default, it doesn't show. All right, but typically you put it into a folder that's called archives. Okay, and that's what they do at the end of the chapter. So we'll talk about that. Again, when you're adding an article and editing an article, as it says, the screens are identical except for the titles. So this is what it looks like, and the author breaks it up into the different areas that are in here. All right, so you've seen this kind of stuff already, and again, when you create a new article, you can immediately go in and you can put it into a category. All right, you can always come back and change that category later. Some of the stuff that's in here, all right, some of the stuff at least we've already talked about already, such as I just mentioned to you, it can be published or unpublished. All right, the access we're going to get into, I think it's chapter 9. Notice right now it defaults to public, but you might want it that, you know, I've talked about this before, that maybe you want the teaser, maybe you want the first paragraph, that's available to the public, but then you want the rest of the article only available to people who are registered or something like that. All right, is it a featured article? Okay, typically if it's a featured article, it'll appear on the front page. We already know that. We've talked about that before. Some of the other things that you can do with it, again, they'll talk more about this in here, and they'll explode this a little bit, but this is the tiny MCE editor that comes with Joomla. And if you don't like it, you can either A, extend it, or B, use a different editor. All right, and they'll talk about that a little bit in here also. All right, as you go down and you start looking at what's in here, you'll notice there's a couple different ways for you to come in here and add images. You can click the image button, and when you do that, it'll bring up the images folder and all the subfolders, etc., and you can add it through there. It's a little bit limiting, but you can do that, and it works just fine. Or you can go down to the images and links section that's down below that. You've seen this kind of thing before. Hopefully, if you've been following along, you've done this kind of thing before, where you've got the intro image, which is typically your thumbnail, all right, and you've got your full article image, which is typically the same as the thumbnail, but it's the bigger size one. You've got your floats in there where you can set it left, right, or whatever. All right. Now, one of the things that we'll get to in here a little bit today, notice there's a link A, a link B, and a link C. All right. They're going to talk about that, and they're going to explain what those are. What they're going to do is, and I'll be doing it too, or at least trying to, is creating this article, and then we're going to separate it both into, into pieces, and then almost the equivalent of individual articles, because that's what this chapter is about. What the author does in this chapter is he uses a kind of a contrived example. And what I mean is he takes a simple article that's got 5 paragraphs in it. At the beginning of paragraph 1, he adds an image. At the beginning of paragraph 2, he adds an image. At the beginning of paragraph 3, he adds an image. At the beginning of paragraph 4, he adds an image. And at the beginning of paragraph 5, he adds an image. Then he talks about how you can break that up, because if it starts to get a little bit unwieldy, how you can break that article up. All right, and he actually breaks it up so that it then appears on 5 different pages. And you get your double greater than little buttons on there, so if you want to move up a page and back a page, etc., we'll see all that kind of stuff. But again, I say it's kind of a contrived article because that's probably not something that you would end up splitting into 5 different pages. All right, and he mentions in here that if you're going to do something like that, because again, this is kind of the heart of the chapter, that might be something, for example, you might do like a tutorial where you were showing each step of the tutorial on a different page, or something like that. So some articles, some of the stuff that you put into a site lends itself well to this, but he just grabs something pretty simple to show it to you. What you'll notice also is when we get to this stuff, you'll have the articles in there, and when you have the article either on the top or on the bottom, depending on where you decide to put them, you can have links to 3 different articles, and you'll see that. You know, it's kind of like the equivalent of, you've seen this kind of thing either on a website or in a newspaper or online, where you've got like a see also type of thing. All right, or if you want to find more information out, etc. So we're going to talk about that in here also. All right. So he explains what the different pieces are in here. I'm not going to go through those. All right, but again, you know, if you've got the page here, page 145 in your book, and it doesn't work very well because you're flipping back and forth, but on 146, he just kind of explains what the different things are. I tried to just do it my way, just by walking you through it like I just did. All right. So starting on the bottom of page 146, he comes in and says, making your words look good, formatting article text. So again, your client wants you to add new content to the site explaining the characteristic qualities of bad art. You've been sent a text file. Well, we're just pretending you've been sent a text file. Can you please create the new article and make it look good? So the idea, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but what we want to end up creating, got to move up quite a few pages here. Is going to be something that looks more like this. So in other words, you're going to have a beginning paragraph here, and then he asks you to put these these H, I think they're like H3 headings. Abstract, chaos, poor anatomy, too much detail, and there's another one. And then he asks you to add images, and he floats the first one to the left, the second one to the right, the third one to the left, and the fourth one to the right. So this is kind of what he walks you through here. And it's funny because what I had done when I first went through this book is I went through all this stuff. I didn't have his pictures, so I just grabbed other ones, and it wasn't any kind of problem. But then I kept thinking about this. Okay, if I do it for the class, the good news is I can just sit there and do it with the class and say, follow along with me. That's the good news. Bad news is, what if I screw it up? Then I'm screwing it up in front of all you. So I could do it ahead of time, but then it's hard to remove it and then recreate it without screwing it up. So I'm just going to do the best I can, and if I screw it up, I'm going to screw it up. All right, that's just kind of the way I look at it right now. So again, I'm on page 147 in the book, and I'm just going to be following the stuff that you see right here. So navigate the Content Article Manager, click on New. In the title box, put What is Ugly Art, all right, or just What is Ugly Art, sorry. And let's see, so let's select the Bad Art category from Facts, all right. So bad art main category, facts subcategory. Notice by default, as it says, it's set to published. They set it to unpublished. You'll oftentimes do that as you're creating an article because it's not done yet. All right. And as it says, we don't want the article to show up on our home page, so we'll leave features set to no. Then they go in and they ask you to do what I just mentioned to you. All right, go into Lipsum or something like that. Paste in 5 paragraphs. Before paragraph 2, put abstract chaos. Before paragraph 3, poor anatomy. Before paragraph 4, too much detail. And before paragraph 5, hideous colors. All right? And then they come in and have you change those and make them heading 3s. Okay? So as it says, once you've done the first one, go back and do the other 3. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do for you right now. All right? So here's my 5 paragraphs. So I'm just going to grab those so I have them available to me. Copy them to the clipboard. Get into here. All right, get into here. And as it says, I'm just following the steps then. Content, Article Manager. All right, and new. Remember, if you don't want to do it that way, they also mention this, because I haven't been going through all this stuff, but the flyout thing, where you can go to add new article from over here under content, either one of those works. Again, I'm just, for whatever reason, I started doing it like this, because that's kind of the way he did it in most of them. I was comfortable doing it that way. All right, but whatever way, it doesn't really matter that much one way or the other. All right, so I'm going to click New, as it said. We get the screen. We've already talked about this, and it's just what is ugly art. There's all sorts of things. I'm going to mention this to you. I don't want to get off. I get off on too many tangents anyway. But many books will tell you, especially English books, and I don't know, maybe you had this in your oral or your written, probably your written comm class, but notice I capitalized the word is. All right, and believe me, I was a journalist. I literally worked for a newspaper, 2 different newspapers for 4 years. And in titles, do you capitalize things like that? I just think it looks better to capitalize it. All right, Word will take that and it'll typically flag it as being an error and tell you that you should have it in lowercase. I don't really care. All right, so I'm just saying either way would work. Okay, so under the category, as it says, under bad art, we want to choose fax. All right, the status by default is published. We want to stick it to unpublished. Again, if we were all done and we wanted to, we could also archive it from here or we could trash it from here. All right, we don't want it to show up on the main page. All right, so we want to make sure that for featured, which I don't know where that is right now, but it's under the drop down. Yeah, I got to close that. There we go. We want it set to no. All right, so that's everything that's in here. So we bring up the screen right here, just as it says. Okay, so as they mention in here on step 6, we want to add the 5 paragraphs. There they are. That wasn't very hard to do. So on step 7, it says that we want to go in, basically we want to add these headings. Actually, it's the bottom of step 6. So we want to come here and we want to add in abstract chaos and hit enter. Before the next paragraph, we want to put in poor anatomy and hit enter. Too much detail and hit enter. And then finally, hideous colors and hit enter. Now, are you all aware of the fact that as you work your way down here, and you're going to see this, that when we're working in the editor like this, everybody see this? That if I go down to the bottom of my editor page, there's that image thing that we mentioned before, but there's also a toggle editor down here, which you may or may not have seen. If I click that, literally what it does is it shows me all the HTML tags. Some people find it easier, especially if you've got a lot of HTML experience, that to just keep that up and play with the tags like that. All right, and for instance, if I wanted to, I could go down here and change my tags, my H whatever, from there too. I'm just going to close it. I'm going to try to follow what the author says right here. All right, so I've gone through the first 6 steps. Then they say let's use the text editor tools to change the basic formatting of the text on the top of 148. Put the cursor anywhere in the line with abstract chaos, all right, which is right here. You can highlight all of it. It really doesn't matter. And it says click on the formatting drop down. All right, and what it is, so I better read this. It says click on the format drop down. It shows paragraph format by default and select the predefined heading. So there, I want a heading 3. Okay, so I changed it. You see the color changed and it looks pretty much the same way that it did previously. I can go to poor anatomy and then come in and do the same thing. Format, formats, headings, come down and find heading 3, too much detail. I mean, you see there's a pattern here because we're doing the same thing every time. And then finally, hideous colors. So right now, what we've done is we've set up those headings. We haven't done anything else. So I've done, as far as I know, everything that's shown there in the first 8 steps that you see on the page. Okay, so I've done the stuff on pages 147 and 148. They do mention, going back to the book here, that if you want even more control, that as the author says here, the font style is set to heading 3. What it looks like depends on the CSS template or CSS style sheet of the template you're using. And in chapter 11, they'll talk about how you can play with templates, and if you change the template, this may look markedly different, is what they're getting to. All right. So as it says, the article editor gives you a rough impression of what it looks like, but it's not really that reliable. So it says you'll probably always want to check by navigating back to the front end as soon as possible. All right, I'm not going to do that. We can, but there's no reason to do that right now. So what just happened? Page 149. We've created the new article in the facts category. All right, we formatted some text. All right, and then the author says, feel free to go in and play with a bunch of the other stuff. And then he shows you the toggle editor, which I already showed you. All right, and then on 150, he comes in and he mentions in here, and I'm not going to do this, but you can go to Extensions, Plugin Manager, and click on Editor TinyMCE. And if you choose Extended, notice what it changes to. You get a lot more options. Not only that, when we get to, I think it's chapter 10, they'll show you another editor that you can use. TinyMCE is kind of a generic editor that really wasn't created for Joomla. All right, so they've created sort of a version of it that's Joomla, more Joomla specific, and they go over that in chapter 10. All right, so as it says, if you find it too limited, you can replace it with another free one. One again that's the JCE, which we'll again go to in chapter 10. All right, so the author comes through here and says adding images to articles. So if you're following along, I'm on page 150, and I'm going to try to do the stuff that's shown there on pages 150, 151, and 152. So as they say, everything's fine thus far, except for the fact that all that we're showing here right now, the only thing we're showing is text. You know that. That's all that's here. All right. So the author says it might make a little bit more sense to add some images. After all, this is an art site. All right. So you'd probably want to add some images. So that's what he has you do next. Now, again, don't want to read to you, but please look on the bottom of page 150 as far as what the author says. All right. The time to go and do your resizing of stuff is before you put it in. All right, before you put it onto the page. It may be that you have a very good reason, depending on the type of site or whatever. You may decide that if you're going to create a site that you want your images to be all different sizes. You may also decide that depending on the type of site you have, you want all the images to be the same size, because just for uniformity type of reason. It depends on what it is you're trying to do. All right, and he gets into that a little bit in here, and he talks about it a little bit in other chapters too. But he mentions that there are resizing types of things, and he gives you, using Photoshop and GIMP, picresize.com. I've already mentioned to you things like if you're a little bit strung as far as you can use 100 by 100, 200 by 200, 250 by 250, or 300 by 300. I think those are the 4 options if you go to makeathumbnail.com. And that'll typically take just about any image and make it that size, and you don't lose. There's no distortion in it. Sometimes it looks wider or whatever. By and large, I've done that a lot for different things that I've created, and it looks pretty good. All right, so it says to add images, you'll first use Joomla's Media Manager to upload the files to the web server. Well, I've already got those out there, so I'm not going to worry about doing that. All right, so really the stuff that's shown there, again, what I did was kind of a cheesy little hack. I think I told you this before, but in case I didn't, what I did was I literally went in and under the C drive, under XAMPP, under htdocs, and under Joomla, and under images, I literally just dropped the author's folder in there that's got all the stuff. All right, and we're in chapter, 6 right now, so I can grab all of these pictures that you see right here if I want to do that. All right, and at least with some of them, I can do a Control-A, Control-C to copy, and I can leave them right there. That's fine if I want to do that, but I can also just paste them here. Now they're right under images. Now it says I've already got this one. All right, so I'll just skip that. I've already got ugly colors because that was put in a previous chapter. All right, so I'll just skip those. All right, but the other stuff is now in here, and he uses the museum large and the museum small and what he works on in a little bit. All right, so, and again, notice we've got ugly 3, there it is, and we've got ugly 4, there that is, etc. All right, so that's kind of a hack. All right, it's really, the author suggests that instead of doing that, you use some kind of an FTP tool and FTP them over there. Just for the heck of it, when I was doing this summer, all right, I just literally just copied them over to see if it would work, and it did. To me, that seemed like a faster way of doing it. You may or may not agree. I didn't see any degradation in quality, and it worked just fine. Yes? Yeah, you very well might be right. Zane just mentioned here that the author probably suggests FTP because he assumes throughout the book that you're putting this on a site. You're not using XAMPP, that you're actually putting it on a live server. So you're right. In that case, it would make a lot more sense to use FTP. All right. So I've got those pictures out there, so I don't think I have to go over the stuff that's on 151 or 150, 151, and 152 because that's what they had you do right there. All right. So I've got the pictures there already. So what just happened? We moved them over. All right, so the time for action, as it says there, inserting and aligning images. So now I'm on the bottom of 152. I'll do the stuff on 152, 153, 154, and 155, and then we'll go over the explanation afterwards. So again, as it says, the author's assuming here you've already closed the article, and I didn't. So where he says navigate the Content Article Manager, open up the article to edit it, and put the image, it says there, place it right before the beginning, or right at the beginning of the first paragraph, below the introductory text, all right, just after the first subheading. All right, so I'm just going to follow his steps that he has here, starting with step 3, because I've got that information, hopefully at least, now in there. All right. So he said to put it right here, right after Abstract Chaos. All right, step 3 says click on the image button at the bottom of the text editor screen. All right. The one thing when you start putting way too much stuff in here, all right, so for instance, there's the example site, I already mentioned that to you, okay, it's like, well, where the heck is all this stuff? All right, and it gets to be a pain when you start to iterate your way through here, and I'm sure that if I took the time, which I'm not doing right now, there are my images, okay, but there would be a much easier way to do this, and I really should have a lot more. Rather than just having the author stuff in there, I should have broken it down and probably just put in different images and put them right into there under the images, or left them like he did in the different chapter folders or whatever. What I'm saying is they're kind of thrown all over the place in here right now, which isn't really a good thing. All right. So we've done that. The pop-up screen, as it says, comes up and it asks you for the contents. Select the image you want to insert. All right, and it says Joomla will automatically add the image into the image URL field. So as I go through here, I'm looking for that one. So let's see, I don't know which one that is. I'm just going to grab ugly 3. I don't know what it is, but it looks good enough. All right. Again, if mine aren't exactly the same as his, who cares? I really don't. And you can see that it put the image URL in there. All right, as they mention. All right. They put it in the image URL field, so which gets us to step 6 on the top of page 154. It says scroll down in the pop-up window to add the other details as are relevant. So we're going down in here. It says in the image description box, type in a description. Notice, as it says right there, that the text isn't displayed, but it informs search engines what the picture is about. Example of ugly art. In the image title box, it says enter a title. Just call it Ugly Art 1. All right, and the author says this is only shown when the web visitor hovers over the mouse pointer. Ugly Art 1, there is an advantage of putting in something like that. Like if I knew that this thing had an actual name to it, all right, I might want to put that in there, but I can leave it generic like that. I might want to do that to swap things in and out. All right. In the align box, it says, let's select left for now. All right. And we can put a caption in if we want to. I'm just going to leave that off. All right. It says when you're all done, come up to the top and select insert. And there it is. And that wasn't hard, was it? Am I right in assuming that everybody gets that and gets how to do that? Yes? So then he says, basically it says place it and repeat the procedure for the next few also. So I'm going to come in here and just basically do the same thing. All right. So I'm right there. I'm going to go down to the bottom again. Click image. All right. Iterate my way through here. It looks like the next one is the picture of the guy, and I think that was in here. So there it is. Choose that. All right. Click insert. Now you see that one's in there. Go to the next one, which looks like the handshake. So I'm going to click right there. I'm just doing the same operation all the time here. So I've got 3 of the 4 in there. In fact, I think the second one was supposed to be right justified, and I didn't make it right justified. All right. So I should go back. Hopefully I go back there and edit it. I don't know why I couldn't. Well, let's go back. Let me close this. Go back up to here. Oh, that's what I just did. So that didn't help any, did it? Selection. No, I don't want to do any of that. In fact, here, why don't I try this? If I click on here and I go to my toggle editor, what did that do? Let's see. Somewhere in here, there's my image, class equal pull left, ugly art. I think that was poor anatomy. So we've got there. Yeah, that was because title. So I'm going to just see. I'm going to see if I can do it like this. Source equal perspective, alt equal, and I'm going to see if I can set it like that, and I'm going to set it to pull right. So I'm manually going in here using the HTML to see if I can change that. All right. On the top, scroll up. Okay. Yeah, but I don't. Well, I don't know if I had the one chosen or not now. But you're right. All right, so let's try that. Let's cancel. Cancel. Go back. Well, that was good. I have not saved, so I hope I didn't lose it all. Should still be in here, right? Well, I might have just lost everything that I did. All right. But hopefully everybody gets the idea. I'll go back and fix it again. But hopefully everybody gets the idea what we did there on 153, 154, and 155. The idea is when we get done, we have this, right? That makes sense to everybody? All right. All right, let me go for a little bit. And when we get done, this is what we should have. One thing they mentioned in this chapter, and I want to say this to you because I have not previously, when you look up here where it says details, normally every single time that we've been creating something, we've been dropping in images, etc., articles, that stuff's been in there. They show you in this chapter how you can remove that also. All right, and if you don't want to remove it, how you can put it in a different spot on the screen. Because by default, it appears at the top like that. That's kind of ugly. So if you did want it, you can say how much of that stuff you want. Like I might have wanted the publish date in there, and I may not want the category, and I may not want the hits. So I can remove what I want to remove, keep what I want to keep, and I can put it either at the top or at the bottom where it wouldn't be maybe as irritating type of thing. So when we get done, this is what we want to have. Okay? And I'll go back and try to fix that during the break. Okay? Recreate it and fix it and do it right. The author also mentions here up on page 156, he talks about putting gutter space in there, and hopefully that isn't, that's not something that surprises people. He's talking about putting a few pixels around it to make it, to get a little white space around it so it's not butting right up against the article, the text itself. All right. Now, next, what we're going to do, and I'm going to have the article to do this, is the author comes in and starts to talk about how you can split this article up. All right. So, what do we call that? We call that just what is ugly art, right? And I don't see it in here, so I think I must have lost all of it. It's under bad art category. Pardon me? All right. What are categories? Oh, facts. I think it's time for a break. Even though it's early, let's just take a break. I'll grab it. I'll fix it. And we'll do that. Let's come back. Let's make it about 10 minutes too, so we have plenty of time. And we'll pick it up on page 157 and see if we can finish up the chapter.